If you read the first 5 books of the Bible, the one thing that you'll be able to see, and you count exactly how many laws there are in the whole book, you will see that there are about 613 laws. So there are 613 do's and don'ts in the first 5 books of the Bible, where God tells them that you must do this, and you must do that, and you must do this, and you must do that, including the 10 commandments, including 2 of the 10 commandments. And they only included 2 because the first 2 are the ones that were heard directly from the voice of God. The other ones were spoken by Moses to them. So I don't know if it's because they don't trust Moses or what, but they don't include the other 8. They're still valid because Jesus repeats some of them in his ministry, but they only include the ones that they heard directly from God, right? So the law in itself has 613 laws. Now imagine in your life having to follow 613 laws to the T. Every day when you wake up, you have to make sure that you tick every one of those boxes. You didn't do this or you did that. And that was what the law was about. It was 613. So now let's go into one of the purposes of the law. It's not the fundamental purpose of the law, but it's the purpose that will best describe how grace comes in. We'll discuss the fundamental purpose another day. So it's just one of the purposes of the law was to create a relationship between man and God. So when God created men, everything was perfect, everything was good, everything was amazing. However, when Adam sinned, God took him out of the Garden of Eden. So there was a bit of a gap between the relationship that God had with men after Adam sinned. Because if you look at the relationship that Adam had in the Garden of Eden, he was able to freely communicate with God, talk to him like he's talking to a friend. God will come and visit them. So you could see that it was a very personal relationship between Adam and God. He was continuously in the presence of God. He was continuously experiencing the presence of God. That was the type of relationship that he had with God. But after he sinned and he was taken out of the Garden of Eden, there was a bit of a gap between his relationship with God. It wasn't as personal anymore. It wasn't as intimate anymore. It wasn't as it was before. And so it was with men after that. That the relationships that we had with God were not as direct and as intimate because of sin. Because the one thing that you must understand about God is that God hates sin. God seriously hates sin. Because when you sin, you are basically choosing something else over him. Something for another day. So that's basically the theology of it, that whenever we choose to sin, God perceives it as we are choosing the world over him. That whenever you choose to do something that you know he doesn't want you to do, you are choosing something else over him. It's like when you are married with your partner and your partner knows this one specific thing that you like or one specific thing that you don't like, or when you ask your partner to do something and they choose not to, and they choose, or you ask to spend time with your partner and it has been a long time, but for some odd reason they choose to go play soccer with their friends. You know, women get very emotional when you do that because they're like, oh my God, you're choosing your friends over me. So it's a similar situation because they feel as if you're not giving them the attention that they want and they deserve. And the same with God, that he feels as if you're choosing so many other things besides him, that so many other things will come before you choose him. So he hates sin. And the moment man sinned, it created some sort of a gap between them and God, because now they had completely sinned and they had completely done something wrong. And now God with the law was trying to basically bring them back and to tell them that, guys, if you want to develop a relationship with me, this is how you should live. So the law was basically a guideline that God had put forth to say that this is how I intended man to live. These are the principles by which I intended men to live by. These are the ways in which I intended men to live. So if man wants a serious relationship with me, if man wants a good relationship with me, then these are the things that man should be doing. So that was what the law was created to do. It was created to foster an environment in which a good relationship with God can be cultivated. Because remember, the Garden of Eden was an environment in which Abraham was able to have a good relationship with God. So through the law, God was trying to replicate the environment that the Garden of Eden had so that we can ultimately have the same relationship with God when we follow the law. Does it make sense? Mm-hmm. So that was the whole point of the law. God was trying to cultivate an environment, cultivate a relationship with men that was strong, and taking it back to the point where it was intimate and what. But because of sin, it was gapped before. So he brought the law as an attempt to try to make men righteous. right? So it was an attempt to make man righteous, so that man can be righteous by their own actions, so that man can be righteous by their own choices, so that man can be righteous by choosing God every day. So you can see that the law and grace, that was the law, that was what the law was about trying to attain righteousness through our actions. But now the problem is that, can somebody just open James 2 verse 10? James 2 verse 10. And read it for us. James 2 verse 10. After Hebrews.
James 2:10.
Hey.
For whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles at just one point is guilty of breaking all of it.
Yes. What's that?
First one.
Verse 10. Please read it again.
For whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles at just one point is guilty of breaking all of it.
Okay, so this, you look shocked. What's wrong? Are you not finding it?
Nah, phone is acting up.
Oh. Anyway, James 2 verse 10 basically says that if anybody keeps all 612 laws in the Bible, but breaks one, they've broken all of them. So imagine trying with everything in your mind to keep all of those 600 laws, and you know what, from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to sleep, that's you trying to keep all of them, and then you slip up once. According to the law, you broke all of them. So it is as if you didn't keep any of them. So it was very frustrating because the moment you broke one, even if you kept the other ones, you had sinned. So the moment you had sinned, your relationship with God was broken again. And then you had to start developing it again by refraining from sinning. So it was a very, and if you read the book of Numbers, you see that there's certain things that God says that if you do this, then you will be unclean for the month, or you'll be unclean for the day, you'll be unclean for the hour. I'm not sure if you've read that. But then he was basically saying that your connection with God for that next day was broken, or for that next month was broken, or for that next hour was broken. So your uncleanness because God couldn't tolerate sin. He couldn't tolerate looking at you or being in a relationship with somebody that was covered in sin, because he hated it so much. So now he couldn't have a relationship with men because of that. And the challenge is that as men, you would keep all 612, you'd break one, and it would be as if you'd broken all of them. So for the first few months, it's human nature, for the first few months, or the first few days, you try to keep all of them, but then you'd see, what? Here, I'm just really playing with my mind. And then after some point, you'll just stop trying at all. Right? You just stop trying keeping the law. You just stop trying to keep the law. And that's what we see happening many a time with what the Israelites did, that there would come a point where they just stopped trying. They stopped trying to keep the law. They stopped trying to have a relationship with God. They would even go and worship other gods because it was just so heavy to keep this law. It was just so heavy to keep this law that says that you break one, you broke all. And there was no way in which they could really attain righteousness. There was no way in which they could really attain the righteousness that was necessary or deemed necessary for them to have a proper relationship with God. Because no matter what they tried, if they slipped up once, it's gone. So it created a little bit of a problem, because if you see, especially in the book of Judges, they slipped up many a times. Many a times they slipped up because they just came to a point where they couldn't take it anymore, They just came to a point where they couldn't try anymore, because what's the point of trying if at the end of the day you're going to fail? Because, think about it. Keeping 613 laws, that's a lot. That really is a lot. A lot of things to consider, a lot of things to put in your mind. So, with that being said, there was a perpetual thing in every generation. Men would just sin, they would just sin, they would just sin. And then God brought this thing of sacrifices. So what sacrifices did is that they would cover your sin for a specific period. So there's a lot of sacrifices that they did. You can read the book of Numbers. There was sacrifices. The biggest one was the one that was done during Passover, where the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies with the blood of a lamb and pour it. I can't remember if he pours it on the tabernacle. It's the tabernacle, right? The Ark of the Covenant, sorry. Or he pours it on the Ark of the Covenant. Or he does something weird. I forgot the details. And in that way, he would be atoning for the sins of everybody in the nation of Israel. It was basically just, you see, the problem with it is that, the problem with atonement is that it just covered your sin. It didn't remove it. And in the moment you sinned again, that covering was removed, and that sin that you just did was added on top of that, and all the ones that you did before were then visible. So it was a big problem because no matter what you did, you were always back at square one, and your sins were always remembered, your sins were always visible to God. But it was a challenge for God because God loved the person, but because he hates the sin as well, it became a conflict of interest because here he is, he loves the person, but the person is covered in what he hates. So it was a bit of a contradiction for him, and he was stuck between a rock and a hard place at this point because now he can't really do much because as much as he tries to have a relationship with you, the moment you sin, there is this horrible sight that he sees. And there's horrible smell that he begins to smell, and then he just draws back because he can't stand it. And then you'd go and give a sacrifice that for the next few hours you guys would be good, and then you sin again, then it's back to square one. So it was just this whole tug and pull, just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, no progress. Is the atmosphere of the law created? Do you see the difficulty in which it was, or the difficulty that the law presented? It was very difficult for one to have a relationship with God. So that was basically it. And so now we come now into the dispensation of grace. Now remember now that when God established the law, he made a covenant with men that if they keep this, they will be a holy people unto him. I'm not sure if we should read it because, okay, let's just go to the book of Exodus. Exodus chapter 19. Let me try and find it quickly. You can read it from chapter 3.
Exodus 19.
Yeah, it basically tells you there that you can see, okay, the heading on my Bible is the purpose of the covenant. The first covenant, this covenant means the covenant of the law, the covenant that God had with men. So this is before God gives man the law. Because the beginning of the law is chapter 20, where God gives man the first 10 commandments. So in Exodus chapter 19, God is basically explaining to men why he's about to give them the law and the reasons why he's about to give them the law. And yeah, you can read it there, our English. Yeah.
It's verse 3.
Yeah, from verse 3 until verse 6.
Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "This is what you are to say to the house of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully, keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites."
Okay. So just want to focus on verse 5 and 6. In my version it reads, "Therefore if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Israel." So we can see that God was just trying to have his own people, have his own kingdom, which ties in really well with the message of the kingdom of God, which we'll discuss on another day. But that was basically God trying to do with the law. He wanted to have his own people, a people that he can have a relationship with, and people that he can truly have a relationship with. And hence, he brought the law, that through them following the law, he could be able to decipher who is his and who is not his. I mean, laws are one of the major things in which we can determine where we come from and who we are. For instance, how do we know, what's the easiest way of determining if somebody is a Muslim, a woman is a Muslim? Exactly, by the parts that they're wearing, or by the way that they pray. You know that at 12 o'clock, immediately this person is going to get up from wherever he is and go pray. So by the laws that they live by, the principles that they would be able to live by, you are able to determine if this person is Muslim or what, right? Mm-hmm. You get, and in the past, I was talking to my grandfather's grandfather, and he used to tell me that in the past, the way that they were able to see if you were Xhosa or Zulu or whatever, without you speaking, was basically by the way you did things and the way the laws that you followed, because they were different from tradition to tradition and from culture to culture. So they were able to decipher where you're from. So you get to understand that the laws that we live by and the principles that we live by have a very strong bearing on who we are and on who we belong to, or where we are from, or what we believe in. You know, for instance, if you're from Amsterdam, where you're not smoking weed, you do it all day and all night because it's legal there. However, you're coming to South Africa and it's not legal. So you find people going to Amsterdam who don't know that it's legal there, and even though they'll just be smoking there in the corners, and people will be asking them, why are you doing this? But it's because of the laws from where you come from. This is not legal. So hence, by the laws that you follow, they were able to determine where you are from. They were able to determine who you are. And it's the same thing with our lives, that by the laws we live by, by the laws the Israelites lived by, God wanted it to be shown that they were His, and that they had a relationship with Him, and that they were His people. That was the whole point of the law. We'll go deeper into it as time went on. But because of the difficulty of sin and all of that, it became a very difficult thing, a very difficult relationship to have with God because of sin. So God had to find an alternative plan. He had to find an alternative way in which He would speak to man. He had to find an alternative way in which you could have a relationship with man. But now, see, the one thing I wanted to show you here, sorry, before I lose my train of thought, is that the law was a covenant between man and God.